Is there such a thing as going too far when you've lost everything you love? On this episode, I sit down with author Holly Rae Garcia to peel back the haunting layers of her debut novel, Come Join the Murder. Together, we dive into the psychology of vengeance, explore the gray areas where the line between victim and perpetrator blurs, and discuss why everyday horrors often linger longer than the monsters we imagine. Whether you see her story as extreme horror, psychological thriller, or a twisted meditation on justice, one thing's for certain. Today, you're invited to join the murder. If you enjoy the show, consider supporting it by subscribing to my Patreon for exclusive daily blog posts and weekly book and film reviews. Head over to patreon.com/The Dark Mind Podcast and become a citizen of the darkness. You can also support the show for free by subscribing to my YouTube channel. Your support helps keep the dark conversation alive. So without further ado, I give you Holly Rae Garcia. Holly, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you for joining me on this 17th day of August 2025. It was a pleasure meeting you in person at Texas AuthorCon, and when you suggested that I read your first novel, Come Join the Murder, because it was your favorite, I quickly realized why. What I thought would be a psychological thriller, which it certainly was, also turned out to be a work of extreme soul-crushing horror, combining the worst grief imaginable with the most brutal crime imaginable. So thank you for writing such a great work and for joining me on the show and allowing me to join the murder.
That means a lot. Appreciate that.
Absolutely. Well, so the book is about a woman named Rebecca Crow who leads a quiet PTA life, working from home and doting on her husband John and their 4-year-old son Oliver. That life shatters when, after rushing to help John and Oliver with a flat tire, they vanish. The family car is later found at the bottom of a canal with Oliver's body inside, and John is missing. Crushed by grief, Rebecca quickly turns her pain into a single-minded quest for revenge. Her only lead is John's account of a battered van pulling up while they were stranded. Its driver, James, has developed a taste for murder, and his growing obsession with murder mirrors Rebecca's fixation on vengeance. And as both are drawn into a deadly orbit, a watchful detective closes in, and that's where the story really takes off. So, Rebecca Crow makes increasingly disturbing choices in her grief-stricken quest for revenge. At what point in writing her character did you realize she'd crossed a moral line that you weren't sure your readers would follow her past?
I would say the second, and there's going to be spoilers, of course, in this discussion. That's okay, right?
Oh, if it's okay with you, it's okay with me.
The first time you can sort of not really excuse it, but she's not thinking clearly. It's revenge, and she just wants justice. But then when she realizes she made a mistake, I think a normal person maybe would have stopped there, said, "Okay, I'm ill-equipped for this. Let me it." But because of her grief, she kept going, and I think that maybe was the point that might be harder for people to to follow.
Gotcha. Well, so James Porter isn't your typical villain. He's almost casually murderous rather than dramatically evil. What made you want to write someone whose violence feels so mundane and workmanlike rather than theatrical?
Well, so I know we're getting a lot of emotions from Rebecca's point of view, a lot of grief, a lot of heaviness. And so I kind of wanted to contrast that with James, have something, dare I say, a little lighter, but sort of more intense when you think about it. But he's a psychopath or a sociopath or whatever you want to call it. But he definitely lacks the emotional side of things. He has a soft spot for his mom, but that's pretty much it in his life.
Yeah, it is kind of funny. Like, especially, I don't know if I imagine it translates to real life, but when you watch a lot of like gangster movies, whether it's like mafia or street or, like the Irish mob or something like that, it's funny how the most insane, brutal, psychopathic, like, oh my God, I don't even want to look at them in the eye because they might slit my throat. When they go home, they're like, hey, ma, it's like, and if their moms are pissed off and slapping them around, they're like, I'm sorry, I'm sorry.
Well, and that's, I mean, it's set in the South. I live on the Texas coast, and that's where the story's set in sort of a mixture of Freeport, where I'm close to, and Galveston. So some of the landmarks are a mix of those two. But it's definitely a Southern thing where you show your mom respect, and no matter what you do in your daytime life or whatever, you're not too old for a whooping.
Yeah, definitely. And actually, what jumped into my mind was, I'm assuming you've seen Breaking Bad.
Oh, I love Breaking Bad.
What was it Tuco, the first guy he tries to sell to?
I think so, that was his name. I'm
Yeah,
terrible.
those two guys chase after the old woman, and
Yeah.
it turns out to be his abuelita. And he's like, gingerly guiding her upstairs, and then he beats the hell out of him. Anyway, circling back to the book, some readers found the repetitive scenes where Rebecca imagines different versions of her family's final moments a little confusing initially. If you could you walk us through why you chose this technique and what it reveals about trauma's grip on memory?
Yeah. So she definitely was going through the stages of grief. Um, like that was a conscious decision to try to hit those. As far as making it the sort of the crux of the story is all these different death scenes. Um, I wanted to do something a little different that you weren't expecting. It was never a who done it book. You always knew who it was, but you didn't know why. And what was more important to the mom, Rebecca, is she didn't know how. And she became obsessed with these last moments of her son's life and her husband's life. She was not a great mom. She was sort of type A, career focused. Her husband did all the sort of mothering at the home. So she had regrets with that. And I think she was trying to consult, like, I don't know, have that make sense in her head, maybe prove that if I can find out what happened, I'll be it's a better parent. I'll be a better mom. And she had regrets for how she handled a lot of things. And so I think having that play in her head, that singular focus, that's where that type A comes into play again, which is no longer focused on work. And now she has this goal with sort of blinders on, to find this who did it and what exactly happened. So she sort of got triggered every time she saw this white van or something that maybe, related to her husband, like a watch or something on someone's arm, that she thought, well, I got him a watch like that. And she's definitely an unreliable narrator, and she's losing her mind. I mean, and it's that slow sort of devolution, right, of her mental capacity to handle. And as far as the different scenes, I don't know why I chose to focus on that so much. And I know a lot of people say like the first one when they're like, yeah, she got him, and then the second one they're a little confused, and by the third they're understanding what's happening. It's in her head. Um, but I don't know exactly why I went that way. It just seemed to make sense to me with her character.
Yeah, and I guess it's not entirely accurate what I said earlier, living the PTA life. I mean, she's in a domestic situation, but like you said, a type A personality, ambitious, and John is kind of the how did you put it, the nurturer, so to speak.
He definitely was in that relationship, and she loved her son. That was never a doubt, but it's how she showed it, you know.
Well, the novel explores whether, quote, good people do horrible things for good reasons. Did writing this book change your own thinking about the moral spectrum between victim and perpetrator?
No, so that's I love that question because it's my favorite thing to discuss when it comes to this book. I love the idea that we're not all so different that, like my husband jokes, that the Pope could kill someone and given the right circumstance. And good people do bad things for good reasons, and bad people do good things for bad reasons and or good reasons. Like James in the story was just trying to help his mom, and to him that made sense. I'm helping my mom out. And Rebecca, it made sense in her head what she was doing. And as a parent myself, I have two kids. They're grown now, but I don't know what I would do to protect them. I'd like to think I'd do anything if I had to protect them, or even to avenge them. Or I'd like to think I wouldn't go as far as Rebecca did. But I love the idea that we're not all that different. And some people are sort of, there's that born bad mentality, and then there's the circumstantial, uh, where you do things that aren't, done in polite society, but there's a good reason for it, or something pushed you to it, or broke you and resulted in that. And I just love that idea of good people doing those things and bad people doing good things. And no one is singular focused, people throughout history of horrible people. Some weren't all bad, and good people weren't all good. So it's playing on that.
Well, so Come Join the Murder has been compared to vigilante revenge stories. How conscious were you of subverting or embracing genre expectations around justice and closure?
Hmm. So I don't know if it was a conscious decision to look up like genre expectations of, when I wrote this book, I was very, very new to a lot of the writing community, the writing world, and tropes themselves. And maybe that's why I like this one so much. I didn't overthink things, where I tend to a little more in the later stuff. But I don't think it was a conscious decision to follow or not follow that sort of genre trope or not. I like that some people see it as a horror, some people see it as a vigilante, some people see it as a psychological thriller. It's whatever disturbs you the most that you kind of tend to call it. But I don't think it was a conscious decision.
Well, the story alternates perspectives between victim and perpetrator, making both strangely sympathetic. What were the challenges in maintaining reader empathy for characters who commit increasingly immoral acts?
And that's the thing, right? That you have to have getting your readers to care about your people is the biggest challenge, I think, when writing anything. So I like to hear when people say, "Oh, well, they did, or whatever, care about," and that they even kind of liked the bad guy. He was actually more fun for me to write, and maybe that shows in his POV chapters. I had a lot of fun with him because he just didn't give a shit about anything.
So, Rebecca's experience of loss is deeply personal. Did any elements of her grief process draw from your own experiences or observations of others?
So I wrote in the beginning of the book that my son, he almost drowned when he was younger. And I thanked him for giving me the most horrific experience a mom could go through. And an idea for how to sort of off this kid in this book. It sounds terrible. But he was a toddler. And he was, there's a lot of bayous around here. And he was in a boat with his grandpa. And bayous are muddy, visibility shit, and he fell out. And I was told later, I wasn't there, that he reached down and just felt his hair and pulled him up that way. Couldn't see him. And so a happy ending. He ended up fine. And then fast forward a few more years, and we were at Guadalupe River. We went every summer, and they knew how I was with him. We took him to swim lessons when he was 1 because we knew he was going to be around all this water all the time. And he actually works on boats offshore now, but he's definitely a water kid. But I was cooking breakfast or something, and everyone got very quiet, and no one was looking at, like, would make eye contact. And so I'm looking for the kids, right? Something feels off. And so I saw my daughter, she was fine. I saw my kid, my son, and he looked different. And I got a little closer. He was soaking wet. And that's not how I left him. His dad or grandpa, someone was supposed to be watching him. He had fallen in to the river, and they had jumped in, got him, and put him just back, and didn't want to say anything because they knew I'd freak out. But that kind of gave me those being in my head as far as a terrible, horrible thing for a parent to even, because your mind just fills in blanks and it goes crazy thinking what ifs. And so when I was writing this book and trying to find, like, okay, what can I give her this kind of grief? And so that, of course, came to mind. And I don't recommend doing this now. Like I said, it was my first book. I sort of learned to write by writing this book, and I don't recommend that either. It's a terrible way to try to write something. But it's trial by fire, and I had a blast doing it. But I was learning as I went. And to try to I read somewhere, well, you want to get in their headspace. So I was looking up interviews with parents who had lost children to get in the grief headspace, and watching these hour-long documentaries and videos about just loss, child loss. And then I'm watching videos on what it feels like to drown, like what goes through, like, physiologically, what does that look like? And it was a dark place I was purposefully putting myself in, and I'm thankful that I don't feel like I have to do that anymore going forward with what I write, because that's not healthy. It's not entirely necessary. And maybe some people will disagree with me. So you always do some research and look up different things, and you want to get into the right headspaces. But as far as from a mother's perspective, I don't want to watch any more videos of moms crying over dead children. I can't handle it. It's
yeah, that does seem a little dark.
was not a good idea.
Yeah. Well, your opening scene drops the reader right into the aftermath of tragedy. What made you choose to start the narrative at that exact moment?
Well, I think it's important, right, to start in a little bit of emotion or action or some sort of, or a dark place, or you want to hook the reader in, right? When I was first writing it, the first chapter was her finding this gun. Everything had already happened, and she found this gun in a closet. And that ended up being almost in the middle of the book. By the time I finished it, because I was like, oh, that's a little boring. That's a little slow. We need to start with a little more bang. Because when I read books, if it takes too long getting into it, I don't continue, I like books that start off a little stronger.
Yeah. Are you a fan of, what's that called? In Maison Res?
I don't know that one.
I think it technically means in the middle of.
Yeah.
Yeah, kind of like, I guess, Tarantino.
I love him. I love to study other formats. And Tarantino is his dialogue and Guy Ritchie's dialogue. I wish I could write dialogue like Guy Ritchie, but The Bomb Under the Table was a Hitchcock. Talked about developing tension utilizing this bomb under the table where you have two people talking and they're just talking about mundane things, and then 10 minutes later a bomb goes off. Well, there's no tension there. There's shock and surprise. But then he said, if you have two people talking and the camera pans down to show the bomb under the table, now there's tension and now there's suspense. And then the bomb goes off. You're not surprised, but you've got this rubber band you're stretching the entire time. And Hitchcock talks about that a lot. And then Tarantino utilized it in Inglourious Bastards. Did you ever see the opening scene of Inglourious Bastards?
Yeah, but it's been a while.
Hiding under the floorboards, and
the Jews are hiding from the Nazis. Okay, yeah.
And they're there. It's gonna happen, and that rubber band is just tightening and tightening and tightening. And I love that that method, and watching old interviews with these people and how they thought these things through. It's really inspiring.
Yeah. What was the name? I think it was called Rope, where the two men, one of them strangled somebody and they put him in some sort of a chest or a box or something and draped a tablecloth over it. And like, there was like a dinner party. And so it's an old one. Let's see. Psychological crime thriller. Oh, it's another Hitchcock based on the play. Film was produced, blah-de-blah. Two brilliant young aesthetes strangled to death their former classmate. They commit the crime as an intellectual exercise. They want to prove their superiority by committing the perfect murder. After hiding the body in a large antique wooden chest, Brandon and Philip host a dinner party at the apartment, which has a panoramic view of Manhattan skyline. The guests, who are unaware of what has happened, include the victim's father and aunt.
What arrogance, though.
Yeah. Yeah. Narcissistic personality worse than that.
Absolutely. I'm not a psychiatrist, but yeah.
Well, circling back to the book, James Porter's appetite for violence develops in stages. Did you map out his psychological evolution before writing, or did it emerge organically as the story progressed?
It was more organically. Yeah. I remember I had sort of Post-its on a whiteboard, beats of just what happened. And I think with his, it was mild, like murderous thoughts or something, and then increasing, and then over here, like kills. So like I purposely I wanted a graph of it, sort of. But as far as what he did, and that all just sort of happened organically as I got to know the character more. And it sounds weird because I wrote him, but as you write, you get to know these people and what they would do in different situations more as the characterization gets fleshed out a little more. And so actually what he did was more organic. Yeah, I'm not a big plotter. I did more with that book, but I don't know. I feel like when you plot too much, you lose some of the excitement of writing. Like finding out what happens next sometimes is fun.
Yeah. It seems like most of the people that I interview, if they're not complete pantsers, they kind of have this outline that's like a scaffolding that they pants within.
That's what I do.
Yeah. Okay.
They call him a plotzer or something like that.
Oh, there's a name for it? Plotzer. Oh, okay. Yeah, okay. It makes sense now. I'm like, plotzer, what? Okay. Little combination there. Well, if you were to revisit these characters in a sequel, what unresolved emotional or moral territory would you want to explore?
I don't know that there's any room for a sequel. Everyone dies. And that I did.
Spoiler alert.
I did leave it open at the end that Rebecca, you don't know if she's dead. You don't know if James is dead. You assume, but it never says like, here are their bodies, void of life. It never says that. So I guess you could stretch it to a sequel and maybe have her do a sort of what was that movie with Will Smith? Was it 7 Pounds or something like that, where like his son dies?
Not sure.
7 pounds of flesh was like some sort of thing where like he is donating his organs as he's living to different people to write these lives, because 7 people were killed or something like that in this car wreck that he caused. So it might be interesting that to see Rebecca sort of atone maybe in a next life where she's trying to do right by all these people that she's unjustly murdered.
7 Pounds, 2008 American drama. Tim Thomas sending a text message that'll get you. Sending a text message while driving caused a car crash in which 7 people died, 6 strangers and his fiancée. In a bid for redemption, unable to live with the guilt of his actions, Tim sets out to save the lives of 7 good people. Pretty good movie.
It is. It's interesting. He uses an Australian box jellyfish in one part, and that's unrealistic because they can't keep them alive in captivity. But other than that, it's a great movie.
Aren't those the jellyfish that can kill you?
Yeah.
Yeah, actually, jellyfish in Andrew Nyberg's novel Gallatak were based on box jellyfish, and he said that in Australia, they close most of the beach down during their breeding season because the baby, I mean, they're already clear, but the baby ones are so tiny that they get lost in the sparkles of the water, and those will like put you in excruciating pain for like 72 hours and will straight up kill you if you don't seek medical attention.
Yeah, it's crazy. I in college I got a PADI open water certification, scuba diving. So I was looking into all that because I wanted to go dive over there one day. I'm like, nope, I'm good. They were transporting one time, and a tendril like blew against somebody, and they went into like heart attack or something. It's crazy. They're 10 times more venomous than their most venomous snake. Like, why does this exist?
Well, why does so much of it exist in Australia? I mean, I've never been there, but from what I know and from what I've seen, it's beautiful.
Yeah.
Oh, that's crazy. Well, you famously said you wrote your first book, quote, to see if you could. But what specific moment made you realize you'd crossed from reader to writer? Was there a particular scene or character that felt alive to you for the first time?
So I was in a book club, and I would sometimes say like, well, this book kind of sucked, but they wrote a book and I didn't. So what do I know? And I thought one day like, well, why don't I just try to see if I can? That's how most bad ideas start. And my husband, it's funny, had always said he wanted to write a book. And I got there first. Well, he wrote a children's book. But I wanted to just to see if I could, and then ended up liking it. And I don't know if one thing like crossed over from reader to writer in the process of that. Maybe holding it in my hands finally after it was all published and printed and a physical thing I've now created and put out into the world. But I still don't. I'm still a reader first. I read way more than I write. I'll always read until my eyes give out, and then I'll audiobook still. Like, I don't know. It's a great way to kind of check out sometimes and just relax and sink into a book. And I don't know. That's always going to be number one for me, I think. And maybe that's wrong to say as a writer, but I never get, I knew this person who said she'd never read, hated reading or something. And I said, well, why do you want to profit from something or engage in something that you hate? Why are you writing? What This makes zero sense to me. And it feels false. Like, what are you doing? Are you just trying to keep up with some kind of trend? Or so I'm not that, but I'm also not the writer that has to write, or I feel like I can't breathe. I'm not that dramatic about it. I'm never like, oh, I'll be in a bad mood if I don't write today. And no, it's not, it's not that serious to me, but, and maybe that's a bad thing. I don't know, but You just try to have fun. And when you stop having fun, when I stop having fun, I'll stop doing it.
Yeah, I haven't really narrowed this philosophy down, but it seems like if you want to make money, start a business. Like, I mean, don't get me wrong, it is a great aspiration to uh, make a living doing something you love. But if that's like your primary motive, it doesn't seem like creativity is really possible. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like you do it because you love it first. And then as you get into it, like, oh, maybe I can make a go of this. And you either, get the ideal, which is to make a living from it, or you don't. Regardless of whether you do or not, you keep doing it.
Yeah. And of course, that's always a goal. It's not the only goal, right? I mean, of course, if someone said like, "Hey, here's a Netflix deal," of course I'd take it. You know? And of course, you want people to read your stuff. It's always cool when I do an event and someone comes back and they've read something and now they want to get something else and they want to talk about it. I had someone come join the murder from a different event and then they came up wanting to ask questions about it, and I love that. That's such a cool feeling when you've affected someone else, made them feel something. That's the goal. And if you can make some money at the same time, yeah, but I'm not going to turn it down. But it's not going to pay the bills on my end anyway. But
Well, growing up reading your mother's Stephen King and true crime collection shaped your dark fiction preferences. Which specific Stephen King story first made you think, quote, I want to create something that makes people feel this unsettled?
I don't know that it was any one thing or any one Stephen King thing. I was reading the books way before I should have been reading the books. I always loved the long walk for the simplicity of it, where you take this everyday thing. Everyone walks somewhere every day, and creating this terror from it. Um, I know that that's what Stephen King does really well. Is he takes these everyday things that you do all the time, like a dog with Cujo, a car wreck with Misery, or a fan, or and he turns it into these horrible things. And I think that's what resonates with people so much is, it's, yeah, there's a space for international spy or thriller books, but if you really want to to unsettle someone, I think you take the everyday thing that they think about later, that like the shower scene in Psycho, right? Who hasn't thought of that in the shower? You get soap in your eye and like, shit, I'm gonna get murdered now. I'm not gonna see the person. Like that goes through your head. And what was it, Final Destination with the logging truck? That forever puts that in your head now. This is an everyday thing. You drive behind trucks all the time who have things loaded on the back of their beds. And I that's what I strive to do, is to take the everyday and make it that. Not in everything I write, but it's definitely a goal.
You work full time as a Gulf Coast regional photographer for a chemical company. How does your visual eye from photography influence the way you craft horrifying imagery on the page? Do you see your scenes before writing them?
Yeah, and it hurts sometimes because I see it all in my head. Exactly. It's not a struggle to picture it or to visualize it. And I struggle with realizing not everybody does that and giving them more of what they need to create the scene in their own head. My imagination has always been, it's always run amok, I guess. And I'm definitely a visual person. So it's hard to understand not everybody does it and remind myself to put these elements into the scenes where they can. The hindrance more than a help, I think.
Well, you mentioned living on the Texas coast with dogs, parrots, and quote, too many snakes. Do your pets influence your writing routine? And has living with snakes given you any insights into predatory behavior that shows up in your characters?
No, as far as writing, uh, definitely the parrots sometimes will get loud and it's hard to focus. One talks a lot, one likes to scream sometimes. It's cute when one screams, the other one will say, "Time for bed, cover this bitch up." But they don't really affect it. My office, I can shut the door. It's on the other side of the house. I have written in the reptile room, with sort of like a game room upstairs, and it's it's a good place to write because it's quiet. Snakes don't make a lot of noise, but they're there. They're there, and you can just kind of your eyes can wander over the enclosure and see what they're doing if you need a little break from something. But as far as predatory behavior, I wouldn't say it really influences anything. I've had snakes or some form of pets, reptiles all my life. So it's always been a part of everything I do, I think. So, yeah.
Will you describe yourself as someone who, quote, white rooms in first drafts and has to go back and add sensory details? Can you walk us through your revision process when you're layering in the horror atmosphere after the fact?
Yeah, sure. And it goes back to what we were talking about with photography, and being able to visualize it and realizing not everyone else can. So I have in my office a post-it with the five senses, but also with that, you've got your obvious, the five senses, and then there's placement in the room. What is your body doing? What is your body feeling at this moment? What's the temperature internally and externally? So I have sort of all this down. So I'll write a scene, and my first drafts are almost sort of barely more than an outline, kind of. They're very bare. And I'm telling myself the story, right? And then I go back and add, and you don't add every sensory detail or into every scene because that gets old. You don't want to bore the people, but maybe I'll add some smell here, some taste here, temperature here. What are they doing with their body? Because it's not just a white room. I got to where I still do this. The people are sort of just standing here talking. No one's doing it. They're just standing against a white wall. And that's not how people interact. And so I have to, okay, what would they do with their hands while they're saying this? Or what are they thinking while they're saying this? And because it's all about characterization and getting the reader to feel for your people that you're about to kill, because you want them to care. Otherwise, who cares if they're dead or in trouble, or, and getting them that characterization as far as it gets complicated, right? Where socioeconomic status, that's how they talk. Sometimes it comes from that, or how they hold themselves around people who they think are less than or more than they are. It's all reflective in that character. So you have to have a really clear definition of who this person is. And, but all that comes into play. And all these are on little Post-its around my desk, because like I said, I'm super forgetful. So I'm telling myself the story, and then I'm like, okay, well, someone's going to want to read this. So I need to make where they can see what I'm seeing in my head.
Well, as you just spoke about, you keep a Post-it by your computer listing the five senses to remind yourself to include them. So what's the most unexpected sensory detail that's ever elevated a horror scene you were writing?
Well, no an exact example. I was on a panel at the Texas AuthorCon. I don't know if you came to the horror panel on Sunday.
Oh, yeah. Oh, Sunday?
Sunday's horror. But there were two.
Yeah, no, we were gone.
And there was a question from the audience about how do you up the horror element to make it like maybe Come Join the Murder is very psychological thriller or revenge. How do I bump it into that horror category? Or if you're writing a short story, and my advice and what I like to do is you describe things horrifically. Like if you're trying to describe the color red, maybe there's a pie on the table, and you're like, well, that's red, like whatever. Or you could say, it's the same shade of the roadkill you passed on the way up, and like the sky's not gray, it's the color of someone's face they saw when they had drowned or something. I don't know. But there's a way to describe scenes and senses and smells, everything, where it just touches into that horror category to where it makes it a horror story. And what makes something horror or not is it's very it's different for everybody, right? And I'll argue till the death that Jurassic Park is a horror story, but my husband disagrees. I've had very spirited discussions at almost every convention I've been to with people. It's a giant monster killing you. How is that not horror? But I get that the main thing is this DNA sequencing, and that's science, so it's science fiction, but uh, it's subjective. Some people think that it has to have blood and gore to be horror, and some people think that it has to have murder, or there's so many things can be horror if you just describe it differently. Have you ever seen there's a guy on, I don't know if it's YouTube, and he takes trailers for movies that are maybe romantic comedies or other things, and he makes them into horror. And he takes actual what they're saying from the movies, but he gives it a background music that's darker music, and he'll take clips that makes it look like a horror movie.
Oh God, no, I got to check that out. Well, so I mean, isn't there such a thing as sci-fi horror?
Yes, exactly, right? There's all these subgenres. I say Jurassic Park is horror sci-fi, and other people say, well, it's just sci-fi. But did you see the latest one, the new one?
No.
Everyone said, oh, it's more horror than the others have been. And I think the only reason it was, or that they're even saying that, I don't know if I agree, is that there were mutant dinosaurs that were allowed to live past, infancy. And so you have these giant mutant things. And that's not a spoiler, that's in the thing, but they're terrible to look at. So they're not the friendly little like Land Before Time looking dinosaurs that you grew up loving.
Yeah. And now I want to get into the weeds with this. So what was Alien?
The first or the second one?
The first.
I say yes. I know people say it's sci-fi and the second one is horror. Of course it's horror. There's a monster killing people. I don't know how that's not horror, but I don't know. I'm a huge fan of biological sort of earth-based sci-fi with your mutant animals and giant, like, I love Alligator, the movie Alligator, and Lake Placid, that kind of stuff. Huge fan. And I think that's all tinge of horror, right? Alligator's definitely horror. Lake Placid's more comedy horror, but I don't know. Do you not think Alien is horror? Do you think it's sci-fi?
Well, honestly, I've never put any thought into it. It just pinged into my mind. I was like, oh, Alien. Also, have you ever gotten to that argument? Is Die Hard a Christmas movie?
It absolutely is. It is. Yep.
Awesome.
Horror. I'll say that's not horror.
What's not horror?
A Die Hard.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, definitely not.
And like I said, it's subjective what someone thinks is horror and what other people don't. But giant animals, giant monsters killing and eating people, I'm sorry, that's horror. Like when that cup vibrated with the water in the first Jurassic Park and you were just terrified as a kid, that was horror. He ate somebody off a toilet. Like,
yeah,
it's horror. Now, I want one day, I would love to see an R-rated Jurassic Park sequel or a remake of the original, but lean in. Let's show the gore. Let's show the gruesome stuff and maybe not have as happy of an ending. Like, I'd love that.
Yeah, like a full-on splatterpunk Jurassic Park.
Yes.
Well, circling back to the book, or actually your writing in general, your dialogue is often praised as one of your strengths. How do you capture the way people actually talk when they're under extreme stress or making morally compromising decisions?
So I kind of say it out loud. Like they say, read your dialogue out loud. And I'm one of those that can kind of hear it, as I'm reading it anyway. And your brain will tell you when something doesn't sound normal or natural. And in the stressful situations, you lose focus a little. And I think that's a natural way to be. You repeat things, like I'm like slowing down a little bit and you're thinking about things and you're like, there's a lot of and stuff. And people say, oh, you should take all of that out, but then you get a very robotic voice. And you need those. You need the pauses and the cutting people off, and because that's what you do in a stressful situation. You don't sit patiently and wait for someone to finish their sentence when you're about to die. Like, I don't know. I just try to think of like, what would it really sound like or seem like? And I used to answer. I was a 911 operator, and it was a smaller town, so it wasn't like Houston or anything. But we did the fire, EMS, and police calls for 911. And so I think that helped my writing a lot, because you hear the realistic sounds of a mom who just discovered her dead child, or traffic accidents. And you hear the realness and the fear in their voices and what that sounds like.
Yeah. Well, horror writers often struggle with the line between disturbing and gratuitous. How do you calibrate your violence? What is your internal test for whether a brutal scene serves the story?
Well, that's the $1,000,000 question, isn't it? It's, again, still so subjective. I don't write a lot of splatter. I don't write a lot of extreme horror. I have for some specific like calls where I've been invited to do something, but and I like to read some of my favorite people write it, and I love to read theirs. And I have written scenes that were considered that for other stories, but it needed it. And as far as how do you know when a scene needs it or not, I don't know the answer to that. It's just your gut tells you, or your beta readers will tell you like, hey, this is not necessary. Or like, although what's funny is my husband is my first reader, and his notes are always more gore, more blood. A huge horror fan all his life, and that's what he always wants more of. And he writes that way, but I don't always. The story has to really need it, I think. Or I may just be in a mood one day and just feel like fuck it, let's just mutilate everybody. Depends on the day.
Actually, speaking of your husband, you co-wrote the Easton Falls Massacre with your husband, Ryan Prentice Garcia. Is that correct? So how do you divide up writing duties when one of you loves, quote, the feeling side, and the other writes fight scenes and military flashbacks?
And gore.
And gore.
Yeah. Well, and he was he's an Army veteran, and so a lot of him was put into that character, so it made sense for him to write those scenes. And I brought everything together that we were writing. So as long as you have one person compiling it and polishing, editing, it'll sound better, more smooth. But I wonder if anyone can tell who wrote which part now. I've never really had anyone say, oh, you definitely can tell. But no one's ever said they couldn't tell either. So I don't know. Hopefully it was seamless. But for that one, it started as a short story. That was actually the first thing I ever wrote. And it was a very, very short story. I just wanted to see what I could do, play around with things. And so when it came time to write something after Come Join the Murder, I had this already. I said, hey, let's, help me do this. Help me turn this into something else. And it just kind of built out from there. But we had a sort of not a storyboard. We agreed. We had discussions where we talked about what would happen next. And so I think when you're writing with someone else, you plot. You have to know where the story's going, or they're going to take you in left field, and you got to rein it back in a little bit. And we didn't have too much of that. We worked really well together, and we were still married afterwards, so it worked out.
Well, I'm glad you're still married. Well, speaking of familial relations, your family is described as your biggest supporters. But at the same time, how do you handle writing dark, violent material when your loved ones are reading it, knowing it came from your imagination? You mentioned that your kids are grown, but when they come over to visit? Did they stay the night or did they go home?
It depends. Our daughter stayed the night for a weekend or so, and they were doing work on their house. But they don't really stay that much. We all live pretty close together. My
Does she
daughter,
lock the door?
she she's read everything I've ever written. My son has not read everything, but he's read a lot of it. He was a beta reader for some short stories I did that were set on like a shrimp boat and things, because him and my dad worked on those. Or my dad worked on a shrimp boat. My son knows boating, so they were my beta readers for those. So different people have read different versions of it, but my mom, like I said, our coffee table books growing up were moms who'd murdered their children. So she's
I bet that kept you in line.
she's got a dark spot too, and I love it. So that's never even been an issue as far as, oh, what's mom gonna think when she reads this, or my daughter or my son, because they know me, they know I'm weird. My mom's just as weird. So it's our family has always been very, what is it? We don't really gild the lily. There's a lot of directness, and we know everything about everybody, and there's not much judgment, and just you do you kind of thing. But we're all we like horror, and we grew up watching these things and reading these. Like, she took me to my first horror movie was B.C. Andrews' Flowers in the Attic.
Yeah, that was a good one.
Probably 7. I'd have to go look and see when it came into theaters, because it was in theaters. And she was going with friends, and they didn't know what to do with me. And so they brought me. And I was terrified of that movie. I wouldn't eat cookies for like years afterward. Nothing with powdered sugar. Yeah. And we grew up with snakes, and we grew up in the country. And then my family, they're not sensitive. They're not going to be shocked when they read this thing. It's mostly sort of friends I've made as an adult who don't know that side of me always, or maybe coworkers. But you can't really write thinking, what is someone going to think of this when they read it? You just have to write what you want. And if it's a problem, they can just not read it. I've had really good friends say, okay, I tried to read Come Join the Murder until I realized a kid died, or it got to that part and it was well written, but I can't read it. I'm sorry. I love you. I'm like, and then I recommend books on Facebook sometimes that other people have written, and they were splatter books. And like John Steffens is a fantastic extreme horror author, and I was reviewing something he had written, and my friend, she was an older lady, and she said, "Oh my!" Next time I saw her, we were playing dominoes, like old ladies do, and she said, "Oh my God, Holly, I read that book." I said, "Oh my God, that was not for you. That was Facebook in general. It wasn't for but." Someone who doesn't read horror at all to now jump into a John Steffens book. But I don't really worry about, every now and then I think about work, like, oh, well, what if someone from work like reads this and thinks these things? But you hear stories, right, about horror authors who have lost their jobs, or had issues with their kids, with their exes wanting them to be around their kids because they've written these things, and we're not what we write. Stephen King's not a murderer either. It's fiction. And I don't go to like romance readers and say like, why are you so obsessed with sex? Are you a no? It's not. It's just fiction.
Yeah, the question was more like tongue in cheek. I didn't realize writers have actually lost their jobs over what they write.
It's crazy and I'm sure those are rare, but they stand out, right? But I can't remember. It was like 3 years ago. One of the well-known horror authors lost his job. He was teaching, and there's morality clauses now in every contract. And I have one. So, Come Join the Murder is the only book currently with a publisher, and there's a morality clause in that contract. If I do something or say something offensive, they can drop me, and that's wild to me. So.
Yeah, the apartment complex I live in, there's something in there where it says you cannot speak ill of the staff.
What?
Yeah, like I don't know exactly what that means, but like if if they're not answering the phone and not helping me out, I'm gonna tell, another resident, yeah, those guys suck,
That's some controlling bullshit right there. Don't speak ill of me. What? It's like they're taking your money. You should be able to say whatever you want.
Yeah, I really don't know what's behind that. But so does that mean you can't leave a Yelp review?
I would guess not. No.
Interesting. Well, circling back to the book or circling back to your influences, Edgar Allan Poe is a clear influence, but you also cite Daniel Keyes and Richard Matheson. How do Flowers for Algernon and I Am Legend show up in your approach to character psychology and isolation?
A deep question there. I don't know. I mean, I you assume everything you read or watch or experience is it flavors what you write going forward, right? You have to assume that. I don't think it was a conscious decision to say like, well, I Am Legend did it this way, so her loneliness or her this is going to sound like that. Um, but to say it didn't influence at all, I'm sure it did. I don't think it was a conscious thing. Flowers for Algernon is just a brilliant book. The way he wrote that, and that did influence. Okay, if I can go on a little tangent. So I love when form affects the story, like your sentence lengths or your paragraph lengths or your punctuation, how that affects what you're saying going forward. And that he did that brilliantly with Flowers for Algernon because the have you ever read the book?
No, I haven't.
So the premise is a mentally challenged man, adult, who works in a bakery. He's a prime candidate for this experimental drug that they've given this mouse called Algernon, that white mouse called Algernon. And it made him able to solve mazes. It made him smarter. And they've had a lot of success. And so he was the first human trial. And it made him brilliant. And he became smarter than everyone around him. And the social ramifications of that, where he was happy before, he thought he had friends before. Then, as he gets more intelligent, he realizes like they're making fun of him, or they're not really his friends, or this person. And then he realizes how lonely and sad his life is being that person. And then he sort of overcorrects. And then the mouse devolves and gets worse and then dies. And he knows that's what's coming for him. And he now has the intelligence to know it's coming for him. And so it's even sadder that he knows he's going to go back to this person where he's now tasted a different life. But it's written in a way that it's written from the main character's perspective. So the first few chapters are very stilted. There's misspelled words because it's a journal that his psychiatrist or therapist are asking him to keep these journals. And that's what the story is, almost epistolary, right? And it's he's misspelling a lot. He's misusing words a lot, incomplete sentences. And then it gets cleaner and bigger words and longer sentences and better punctuation. And then it starts devolving again back down. And the way he did that to me was just brilliant. And I know this is a book a lot of people read in like junior high, but it's a great example of using that to further the story and the characterization. And so I always try to think of, I wrote a short story where I used sound a lot. It's called Flap, and it was like a tent flapping, a part of a tent. And so like I would have like a paragraph and then it would say flap, ding, flap, like when the zipper hits the metal pole. And so I try to use stuff like that because it's so much fun to me than just writing like a normal story, or to have like an interview format. Like I did a story that was an American Cannibal anthology. That was all in an interview format. And it's a lot of fun because I love dialogue. And so to me, that's easier for me to write. And then I don't have to describe anything because it's an interview. I can white room the shit out of it and it's fine. I wish I could do every story in that format, but apparently you're not supposed to. So,
Well, piggybacking off of that previous statement, your horror often focuses on, quote, dark fiction with sad endings. In a genre that sometimes offers cathartic victory, what draws you to stories where the darkness wins?
so when I was working for 911, you don't always have happy endings, and that's not a negative worldview. It's just the facts. Bad shit happens, and it's rarely wrapped up in a tidy little bow at the end when everyone's learned some big lesson or some parable, or it's shitty sometimes. And I just think that's more realistic of things that happen. People die in car wrecks and people are murdered, and you carry that with you. It's not always a happy ending. And I don't know. I just feel like that's more realistic. And I'm very, not, I'm creative, but I'm not necessarily a dreamer. I'm like, okay, this is what would really happen. And I like to stick to that.
Well, what is the life of Holly Rae Garcia like outside of writing?
Hmm. So lately, we've had a stressful summer. There was a death in the family, and there's been construction going on here, and it's been stressful. I haven't even written hardly anything this summer at all, as I don't even feel like a writer right now. But hoping things are starting to settle down again. But as far as outside, I don't know. We hang out with our snakes, and that's fun. Haven't even played poker all summer. Yeah, we like to watch movies. It's kind of boring. I'm a boring old lady now, and I like it.
Yeah, I like being a boring old man.
And I do go to, I think, and I'm wearing the shirt. The Texas Author Con is a great convention. It's one of the only ones I go to now. It's a 4-hour drive up north for me, sometimes 5, depending on traffic. But people are great. Texans are different, and there was a whole weekend of no drama. There was nothing divisive. There was just, we're talking about books, we're talking about things we love, and that was great. And I like to do that. I don't really travel anymore for conventions. I don't find it's like when you factor in airplanes and airplane rides and hotels and all of that, and shipping your books there to sell and shipping them back. It's not really worth it for me, even though you don't really look at these as making money. It's more networking, right? But in the fall, there's some more of those coming up that are local. I like to do local stuff. And I'm close enough to Houston. So we're about 45 minutes south of Houston. So you can participate in a lot of that. They just had a big event. I want to see if I can get in next year, but it's hard to get in. So we'll see. But I read a lot. I work a lot. Our life has been an upheaval. So I don't even know what I do for fun right now. Oh, I can answer that in a month or so.
Yeah, I mean, I'm about 4 hours from Texas Author Con, so I like to go there. I've wanted to go to Killer Con, but Killer Con is just so quickly after Texas Author Con that I don't have the time or the money. Texas Author Con is cheap, but you still got the hotel and taking time off work and so on. So it's like, well, Killer Con's immediately after. I'd love to go to Stoker Con. I would really love to go to Scares That Care because, good God, the last one, I mean, people that I didn't think I would ever see were there. I wish I was there because, I mean, like Boris Basic from Serbia was there. MJ Mars from England was there. I'm like, Jesus Christ, I had no idea all these people were going to be there.
It's my first convention was Scares That Care. I think it was 2020 or 2021. And I was like, why am I doing my first one in Virginia? Like it was a good jumping in the deep end though. But they were super nice people. I've gone to Killer Con, super nice. But Killer Con does more focus on splatter and extreme, and then they do the Splatterpunk Awards. but the panels, it's an author convention. It's not a reader convention. And so every panel is for authors, and you get your money's worth definitely sitting in on all of those. And I try to attend as much as I can. I haven't been in a couple years. The other one you mentioned, Stoker, I let my HWA membership lapse this year. I wasn't really getting anything out of it because there were no local chapters. Texas doesn't have a chapter at all. The entire state of Texas, there's no chapter. There's word on the street now that there may be one happening soon. Someone asked me a few weeks ago about it, but I don't know. There would have to be a Houston chapter for it to be worth it again for me, because I have enough online friends and writers and community there that I don't want a virtual HWA chapter. I want an in-person one where you get to know people, but or maybe like share papers that it's different when you're in person. And we had the Houston Horror Author Hangout. It's been a while since we've gotten together. Everybody gets busy. I think Jerry is in that group. He had talked about having another meetup soon, so we'll see what happens with that. But it's different to meet people in person. It's different relationships, and you feel, I don't know, you get to know them a little better.
Well, Holly, it has been a pleasure talking with you.
Thank you. It's been fun.
So as we bring the show to a close, is there anything you'd like to plug or let your readers know about?
Nothing to plug. Still the most recent work is Flesh Communion. It's a short story collection. I don't have anything else on the radar right now. I have a lot of things about halfway finished. That's the trouble, right? You get this shiny new idea and you go somewhere else. I need to focus again. I need to sit down and get productive again. Hopefully I'll have some things to announce soon, but not a lot right now, no. But if they go to my website, hollyraegarcia.com, they can subscribe to the newsletter and find out when I do have things happening.
Awesome. And actually, I totally forgot to ask you, Come Join the Murder being your first, weren't you saying that you got the rights back and we're going to re-release it or update it?
I get the rights back, I think it's February 2026. Well, sorry, that's February 26th is when the contract is up. It was a 5-year contract. And I will be requesting the rights back to it after that. And I'll re-release it with a new cover. I'm excited. I'm thinking about putting a white van on the cover. I think that has more to do with the story than with the current cover. What are your thoughts on that? You've read it.
Yeah, definitely a white van. I mean, that's the object of desire throughout the whole thing.
So I think that would be fun. So hopefully I'll get to re-release that and with a new cover and go forward.
Awesome. Well, we all look forward to that. So listeners at home, all links are in the description. And Holly, thank you again for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
And thank you to everyone who tuned in. If you enjoyed today's episode, please be sure to like, share, and subscribe to my YouTube channel. Be sure to tune in next Tuesday for a new episode featuring the best and brightest authors and filmmakers of dark literature and film. So until then, stay healthy, stay sane, and as always, thank you for listening. See you next time.